Suppose having the mic set up ahead of time is probably a good idea. I had plenty of time today, too. My brain lost it. All right. How's everyone doing today? Happy Thursday. We made it most of another week. Here in the United States, we've got a 4th of July weekend coming up. Yeah. So that's coming up. I think we have, at least my county government has off on Friday. Or not on Friday, on Saturday. Sunday, Monday. We have Monday off. That's when it's celebrated. So yeah, hope everyone's doing okay. It's yeah. What you guys thinking about today? I had added a small part to my policy here for environment and sustainability. Now, this is something I mentioned in one of my previous posts, and I was watching a video or two on this today, and it's something that we're going to have to deal with, especially if we end up passing more and more actual progressive policies. Now, this isn't something, in the next 10 years or 20 years for the most part. We're talking like 100 years from now or so, assuming we make actual progress, that we'd have to deal with it. But we're probably not going to because of climate change, but that's a whole nother thing. But for argument's sake, humanity survives a while, then at some point we have to deal with the global population decline, which is inherent to societal progress. The further along that countries get in progress, shifting from third world to second world country to a first world developing nation of that sorts, they go through this process called a demographic transition. And as they go through that, they get to the first world status, then their population declines. Now, the US and France, and there's a bunch of other countries that are having to deal with that right now, and they're trying to figure that out. Now, this is primarily a problem while we are within monetary systems, because monetary systems specifically needs infinite growth and infinite consumption, right? And you obviously can't do that if your population is receding. So that is something that is going to be devastating to our economic system. And I talked about that in here. Specifically, if we're looking at creating a resource-based economy, right? Implode, right? So I'm going through the 4 different examples. We're talking about, kind of the effects of what just the general transition through capitalism towards a society which embraces eco-humanistic values. So some things that we're going to do is maximize product lifetimes to end planned obsolescence, right? All that wasted stuff. We're going to try to shift to fully recyclable, modular, open-sourced, and universal products to ensure that they're easy to upgrade and fix with minimum wasted resources and time, right? It also end up doing a lot of resource sharing to end, the masses of wasted duplicate products, kind of like the library, right? Now, this part here is going to have an incredible reduction in the number of products that are going to be made. We're going to maximize product lifetimes. They're going to be fully recyclable, modular, open sourced, and we're going to end up sharing a lot of them. So that right there violates the infinite consumption requirement for capitalism. Now, if you look down here, of course, the next step is, by virtue of all these societies progressing through the demographic transitions, becoming first world countries, populations are going to start declining. Now, those two facts alone means capitalism is going to implode, because not only is there just less stuff being bought because we're being more efficient, but now there's less stuff being bought because there is less people. Now, take that and we combine that with near marginal near zero marginal cost for production, efficiency of production and waste and stuff like that, technological unemployment, and capitalism itself will implode. Now, this is regardless of our talks about shifting to a resource-based economy, this is just going to be the natural end of what capitalism is eventually going to be. It is going to end because, assuming humanity survives and climate change basically isn't a thing, but we start making that, universal bend towards justice. And this is going to happen if we don't murder ourselves beforehand. Right, so that's something to take into account. Now, here with the policies, we're not going into that aspect, into the aspect of capitalism imploding, all that stuff, but it's more of something to take into account when we're looking at our infrastructure. Specifically, there's a video I was watching today about modular buildings. So being able to, take a building and build it in a way that's modular, and then when you don't need it anymore, you can, pull it apart and move it somewhere else without all that cost of tearing down and rebuilding and that sort of a thing. So that's one thing we can kind of do as our populations recede. We can start tear down the buildings and use them where they are useful instead of just letting them sit there and rot. Now, albeit we're gonna have to deal with the declining population at some point, and that's gonna have to be a policy thing. If I'm hoping that, if you do shift to a resource-based economy by some fucking miracle, that creates the socioeconomic condition where people want to have kids because they can, because they have the time, because they have the support, right? They have free housing, free education, free, daycare, free travel, free all the things, so that, if they want to have kids, they can just go do it because the social support is there. So maybe that will be one cure for the population decline problem with the demographic transitions within capitalism. I don't know. We'll just have to see if we survive long enough for that to even be a thing. But it is something that we need to keep in mind when we are thinking about things. It's a very, very important thing. All right. So, slow today. Questions, comments, suggestions before we get started? I'm going to read one article on some COVID. I just saw this one today. Crap, what do I do? No! If you have not read about the demographic transitions, take a look at that. That's going to be a very, very important thing. And that's something that I will talk about within a post eventually that I write about the overpopulation non-issue, because that's kind of important there. All right. So, anybody? Anything? Anyone? Anybody? Super quiet today. I know summer is going to wreck my numbers, but anything? Lurkers? Anybody? Okay. All right. We'll get started. Start with this one COVID thing in children, and then we got two here on the horrors of the Biden administration. All right. COVID-19 multisystem inflammatory syndrome affects Black Latino children most. So this is something to think about. Children exposed to SARS-CoV-2 are at risk of developing multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children, or MIS-C. Now, we kind of talked about this before. I think shortly after COVID came out, that COVID, the body's immune response to COVID in some cases was basically an autoimmune attack. Basically, it hyper accelerates your immune system and ends up attacking your whole body. More specifically, the heart and the lungs were the first culprits of it. Now we're seeing heart, lungs, brain, ear, right? and all sorts of things. So this is, I think that's what this is referring to, that autoimmune response going crazy and affecting these children. Symptoms of MIS-C include inflammation of various organs, which can be fatal. However, treatments are available. A study from a Washington, D.C. hospital finds that MIS-C disproportionately affects Black and Latino children. Much remains to be learned about MIS-C, including the best way to treat it. Multisystem inflammatory syndrome in children is one of the most severe and mystifying threats associated with SARS-CoV-2 infections. This potentially life-threatening condition primarily affects people under 21 years. Okay, it is characterized by the inflammation of the heart, lungs, brain, kidney, eyes, skin, or gastrointestinal organs. Sorry, wife. Although MIS-C can be successfully treated if detected early enough, it is a disease of exclusion, making diagnosis difficult. Although children with MIS-C test positive for a current or recent SARS-CoV-2 infection, they may be asymptomatic with no outward sign that infection has even occurred. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report that 3,724 children in the United States have been diagnosed with MIS-C as of May 2021. Study found that heart complications, including systolic myocardial dysfunction and valvular regurgitation, frequently occurred in children critically ill with MIS-C. A study from the Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. finds that MIS-C disproportionately affects Black and Latino children, with Black children at significantly greater risk of MIS-C. Now, my God, it's going to make the Black population much more hesitant to get their children vaccinated, which is going to suck. With this research, the study's authors hope to develop a clearer picture of the impact of MIS-C and to help identify patterns that could promote early detection and successful treatment. The study suggests that early detection and standardized treatment can nearly eliminate short-term mortality as an outcome of the condition. Dr. Roberta DiBiase is the study's lead author and is chief of the Division of Pediatric Infectious Diseases at Children's National. Dr. DiBiase says data like this will be critical for the development of clinical trials around the long-term implication of MIS-C. Our study sheds light on demographical, clinical, and biomarker features of this disease, as well as viral load and viral sequencing. All right, SARS-CoV-2 and MIS-C. The observational study examined the experiences of 124 pediatric patients at Children's National. Of these, 63 were diagnosed with MIS-C and 61 were ultimately diagnosed with different conditions, although their symptoms were similar and served as a control group. Median age of patients was 7.25 years. Of those with MIS-C2, 52% were critically ill. Testing positive by an RT-PCR serology or antigen test for a current or previous infection with SARS-CoV-2 is one of the requirements for a MIS-C2 diagnosis. Consistent with current thinking that MIS-C occurs several weeks after exposure to SARS-CoV-2, more of the children with MIS-C tested positive for SARS-CoV-2 antibodies, indicating a past encounter with SARS-CoV-2. The study found that MIS-C patients with and without active infections The study found MIS-C patients with and without active infections. Okay, the researchers also found that MIS-C patients with detectable virus had lower viral loads than children with a primary diagnosis of COVID-19. Their viral loads were roughly comparable to the children in the control group that tested positive for SARS-CoV-2. All right, the study's findings. The study found that among the MIS-C group, Black children were overrepresented at 46%, as were Latino children at 35%. The overrepresentation of Black and Latino children was especially pronounced among critically ill patients, accounting for 49 and 45% of cases. Children who were the most critically ill were more likely to experience heart complications compared with others with MIS-C, 55 to 28%. The researchers performed genetic sequencing of samples from MIS-C patients and compared results with sequences of COVID-19 patients at Children's National. Most samples were found to be similar to SARS-CoV-2 variants that first appeared in France and that were common for some time in the US and Canada. Now, they don't say which variant that is. One difference the researchers found was that the children with MIS-C had a distinctive cytokine signature with elevated levels of certain interleukins. As we've seen new variants continue to emerge, Dr. DiBiase adds it will be important to study their effect on the frequency and severity of MIS-C. Says Dr. DiBiase, the fact that there were no notable sequencing differences between our MIS-C and primary COVID cohorts suggests that variations in host genetics and or immune response are more likely primary determinants of how MIS-C presents itself rather than virus-specific factors. Okay, so basically they're saying this has probably less to do with viral mutations or variants and more something that happens that's specific to individual genetics. Okay, so there you go. That's just something to keep aware of. Is a thing. You know, it's another reason for you to get vaccinated and to get your children vaccinated to make sure that this stupid garbage doesn't happen. Save the children. I believe children are my future. I can't sing. Teach them well, let them know. Show them all the inside. All right, the next one. Questions, comments on that? As we're moving forward here. Oh, I got my hair cut, got shaved. I switched out my the razor on my electric razor part, so that's working well. I had to go and buy a brand new razor because the one we had was actually pulling my hair, which I will not stand for. So that was nice. The haircut went nice last night. The shave went nice. Clip my nails. Yes, I'm looking all kind of pretty here for you. All right. Biden backs funding more police to fight crime wave. Now, we've bitched about this sort of stuff all the time because, you know, fucking fuckity fuck, right? Let's go over here to my policies. Let's read something I have here for law enforcement and guns. I'm not sure where I put this. Here we go. So, yeah, I talk about that here in the very beginning of this section. If you have not read the first two books of my required reading, then now is a good time to read them. This is the spirit level and the inner level, which I talk about all the time. Because what you will find is that reducing inequality is the most powerful thing we can do to reduce crime and suffering, as well as to increase social trust and general societal peace. The idea here will be to fund social programs such as housing, food, work, minimum wage, education, healthcare, etc. If we increase funding there, then it will result in a large reduction in crime and therefore greatly reduce the need for local law enforcement. The more money you spend on the people, the less you have to spend on policing. This is the core principle for the defund the police movement, and this is a link to my post on the defund the police movement. I'm gonna go ahead and throw that in here for you so you have it. It's a good read. It's useful if you want to understand it. Yeah, check out my economics post for the core policies on reducing inequality and stuff like that. And also, if you want to get a little more into that, the Kerner report goes into it. Right. I mean, pretty much any other government-sponsored study like this says the same basic stuff that I'm saying. And we've known for 100 years how to solve these issues. And more policing has never, ever been the solution to any of this. All right, President Joe Biden has unveiled a plan that includes funding more police to combat a nationwide surge in homicides, which he blamed on lax gun control. He said officials in high crime areas can hire more law enforcement personnel using coronavirus relief funding, which is fucked up. that fund money should go to people. Have we already read this? I think we already read this. Mr. Biden's crime-fighting strategy calls for curtailing rogue gun dealers and firearms trafficking. Okay, sure. Republicans are depicting Mr. Biden's Democrats as weak on crime amid calls by left-wingers to defund the police. Announcing his 5-point strategy at the White House, on Wednesday, the president urged cities and states to use the $350 billion of funding from his COVID-19 relief bill on public safety efforts, including adding more police officers even beyond pre-pandemic levels. Okay, so this is fucking stupid. This money, of course, needs to go to healthcare, testing, contact tracing, and other stuff like that. Fuck Joe Biden. It means more police officers, more nurses, more counselors. We read this already. Yeah, so more counselors, more social workers, and community violence. These sorts of things are good, but not more officers. We do not need more officers. Some members of Mr. Biden's party have amplified calls by Black Lives Matter activists to defund the police, though the president himself has resisted the slogan, which is unpopular with most voters. Well, most voters fucking suck. Mr. Biden, who as a senator wrote the 1994 crime bill widely blamed for mass incarceration of black people, said on Wednesday, "This is not a time to turn our backs on law enforcement and our communities." Well, you've been fucking turning your back on our communities for how many decades, you fuckface? Unless tamed, the crime wave is likely to become a major issue ahead of next year's congressional midterm elections. Well, universal health care, universal education, progressive basic income. I mean, there's lots of ways to deal with this. Federal jobs guarantee, Green New Deal. During his remarks at the White House, the president also took aim at armed insurrectionists, saying they would need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons to take on the U.S. government. The Biden administration has proposed gun control as a remedy for violent crime, although Democratic bills in Congress to limit America's access to firearms have been blocked by Republicans. Of course, because fuck progress. The administration's strategy also proposes investing in community violence intervention programs, employment opportunities, and summer activities for teenagers and young adults, and support the formerly incarcerated Americans re-entering their communities. Okay, well, these are good things here. This is something that we don't really have, and we need a whole structure of things to help people who are in prison get back into life and to become a part of society again. That it's a very important thing. The president recently hosted several big city mayors at White House for a discussion on crime prevention. Did they have health workers there? Did they have BLM people there? They have a whole bunch of impoverished people there to have that conversation. In March, the FBI released preliminary 2020 statistics showing a significant jump, 25% in murders from the year before. So far, the upward trend has continued into 2021. Okay, so some of this will have to do, of course, with COVID and the strains of that. Now, again, had the United States not been fucking stupid and, lockdown, mask mandate, social distancing, had they done all the things that needed to be done, we probably wouldn't be as bad as we are today. I mean, the United States failed at every single level to do anything to help stem the many dead bodies. Like 600,000 people have died in this country, and Biden isn't going to do a fucking thing about that either because he doesn't care. We 99% dying, we are just merely a negative externality to their corporate payday. The Bureau will release its official numbers in September. If early projections bear out, it will be one of the largest homicide increases ever reported. This was a large-scale national increase in violence. Jeff Asher, co-founder of Data Analytics and a former analyst for the CIA and Department of Defense, told the BBC. Some analysts have blamed the wave of homicides on the COVID-19 pandemic, although research indicates the global crime rates outside the U.S. fell or were stable amid the lockdowns. Well, that's because the United States didn't do jack shit about it, and other countries did do stuff about it. At least a hell of a lot more than we did. And of course, a lot of this is also going to be fairly correlative to the level of inequality. We have the highest level of inequality in the developed world, so that itself is going to make sure that whatever bad things happen here is going to be worse here than it is in almost any other country. So, other analysts see the cause as low police morale after the murder of George Floyd last year in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the ensuing civil unrest that swept the U.S. cities. Well, if they stop being a bunch of fucking murderers and executing people because they can get away with it, then maybe things would change radically. So they wouldn't change radically because you wouldn't be dealing with the inequality issue, which is the most important thing you need to deal with. The University of Utah pinpointed the spike in U.S. homicides to late May 2020 when Mr. Floyd was killed by an officer. But even with this steep rise, the murder rate is still far lower than in the early 1990s, but it was almost double the current figure. And crime overall, including rapes, robbery, and other property crime, dropped by about 6% in 2020, among the largest decreases on record, of course, because of the pandemic. So we got here 1986, and it's still quite low. 400 or so. Okay, do we read this one? Fund the police. Fuck this guy. Okay, let's just read it. It's not that long. Fund the police. Analysis by Anthony Zurcher, North American reporter. He looks smarmy. There are a few political issues that, when they reach a boiling point, crowd out about every other subject in national discussion. The economy is one, crime is another. And while things seem to be looking fairly good for Joe Biden on the former, an uptick in violent crime could be a serious challenge for Democrats ahead of next year's midterm elections. Now listen, these two things are indirectly related, right? Now it depends on also how you measure the economy. If you measure it by the fucking stock market, yeah, it'll be indirectly correlated, right? The better the economy is doing through stock market, the worse crime is going to be, because stock market going up means rich people are getting rich and the rest of us aren't. If crime is going up, that means, of course, poverty and inequality is going up, because there's a direct correlation to that. And while things seem to be looking fairly good for Joe Biden, okay, criminal statisticians will point out that the current murder rates are still low compared to previous decades, including the 1990s, when Biden, then a senator, made getting tough on crime one of his top issues, because he's a fucking racist. The general public, however, typically doesn't have such a long-term perspective. The Republicans have offered an explanation that the anti-law enforcement rhetoric of defund the police efforts from last year's Black Lives Matters demonstrations have led to the current situation. Well, no, those demonstrations happened because the police are basically immune and are able to execute people at will with no repercussions. That's what caused it, not the demonstrations. On Wednesday, Biden offered a counter-argument that lax gun regulations are to blame, creating an environment where even minor arguments can turn deadly. He also promised to boost funding for the police. Move them may anger someone left. Of course it will, because that doesn't fucking do jack shit. With an eye on 2022, however, the White House may be calculating that inoculating itself from Republican attacks is worth the risk of inter-party unrest. Well, but that's always going to be the case, which means not a fucking thing's ever going to get done. Now, don't get me wrong, there are things that we need to be doing for gun control. I have those in my policies as well. And we definitely have... Is it here? It is. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff to do for that. Gun sales increased last year as the reports of domestic violence. According to Mr. Asher, there was also evidence that Americans carried firearms more frequently in 2020 because people are idiots. Data on the causes of murders in 2020 is not yet widely available, Mr. Asher said, but in 2019, 74% of homicides were gun-related. Now, I can pretty much guarantee you that white people were the ones who were carrying firearms more than anyone else because, racism. On the eve of Mr. Biden's speech, the Department of Justice announced a new team aimed at tackling gun trafficking in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, D.C., and San Francisco. In New York City, Democratic politicians vying to become the next mayor have largely focused on the issue of law and order, which was widely condemned as a racial dog whistle when it was the theme of the Republican former President Donald Trump's election campaign. Ex-police officer Eric Adams is currently in the lead as results are being tallied. And also in New York, they're doing, for the first time, ranked choice voting there. So that's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. Okay, there you go. So that's the thing. Yeah, I've heard the the breaking points with Crystal and Sagar talking about that today, the election and stuff like that. So there you go. Gun control. Biden being a fucking hoe. Let's look at the issues. So up here again, I talk about that dealing with social and health issues is going to be more powerful than anything else in my policies, and that's very important to understand. Beyond that, here are some things dealing with gun. Owners should have licenses, have a license, insurance, gun safes, yearly inventory and inspections of guns, ammos, and gun safes, yearly gun safety training. You have to close the gun show and personal sales loophole nationwide. All guns should be sold through an authorized licensed dealer that can comply with the laws, such as background checks, registration, and so on. So there's no person-to-person sales. Mandatory nationwide universal background checks for all sales, which should include fingerprinting, psychological background checks, interviews, etc. No guns for abusers and violent criminals and all that sort of stuff. Minimum of 1 month waiting period, and it goes as long as it takes to get it done. Okay, mandatory nationwide registry for all guns, gun parts, and ammunition, public and private. Much like we have to free guns with a bag of cookies. Hey man, how you doing? With a bag of cookies, yes. How about free guns with a bag of edibles? How about we go that way? How you doing today? Happy Thursday. Are you psyched for 4th of July? What? Doing great. Awesome. Yeah, I'm not. July 4th. It's loud. We go outside. I don't like it. It's hot. I'm not sure what we're going to do this year. Typically, we go to our friend's house. They're like 20 minutes away or so, and then they've got a decent fireworks display. But I'm not really for the fireworks thing because, veterans are traumatized. Pets are traumatized, and who knows what other sorts of damage is caused by the fireworks themselves and just scarring the wildlife forever. Liberty Day, yep. Yeah. July 4th, we call it Independence Day, but yep, that's on Sunday, and although at least my work, we get the 5th off, which would be Monday as well. Which I won't complain. Will not complain. Yeah, not sure what we should do with 4th of July. Part of the issues is it worships or celebrates nationalism, which in and of itself is problematic. I know I have to think about that. What are we gonna do with Independence Day on May the 5th? Usually with music festivals. Oh, that's cool. I would rather that happen. Music festivals, they're loud, but they're not explosions like, fireworks. Although you probably have some of those going on too. But yeah, music festivals would be great. That could be fun. I wouldn't necessarily have to go outside. I could keep my windows open if I wanted, and I could just listen to it. But that might actually tempt me to go outside, depending on the music that's out there. So it has to be pretty good music to make me want to go out there. On Thursdays, we have concerts on the square here. All throughout the summer, every Thursday there's someone playing music out here. So it's not something I go out to. My daughter wants to go see it, so we typically go out there and then we see our friends and stuff out there. So yeah. All this outdoor going, it's not my thing. Just more bitching about Biden because there's so much to bitch about. All right, so the article we just got got done reading was about his increasing in funding for police. Now we're going to bitch about his infrastructure deal. And this is from yesterday. Yesterday? Is it 30 or 31 days? 30 days. Okay. All right. Biden's infrastructure deal shows how bipartisanship is a DC code word for continuation of center-right status quo. Exactly. And then, like I bitch about here, the Democrats, they are a center-right conservative party. It's their job to make sure progress does not happen. Again, if you hear the word bipartisan, you know that you're getting fucked in more ways than one. Because obviously, if you are compromising with terrorists, not much is going to happen. You know, whatever he does, that's quote, whatever that is done by Congress that is bipartisan, most likely is we the people are getting fucked. But let's just go ahead and read about this. Not that I'm bitter at all, right? Not that I'm at all bitter. President Biden recently announced that his administration had struck a deal with senators on the long-touted infrastructure bill, and that he had promised voters during his 2020 presidential campaign. I mean, not that I'm his biggest fan, right? Woo, woo, Biden. Totally his biggest fan. I love the dude. I like to put him in a cannon and just fire him over to Russia or something like that. Woohoo! Diplomacy. He seemed particularly pleased by the fact that senators from both of the major parties had agreed to the deal. He said that the development reminded him of the days we used to get an awful lot done in the United States Congress. I mean, for the corporations, right? But not for the people. He added, we actually worked with one another. We had bipartisan deals. Bipartisan deals meant compromise, which means the people get fucked. Especially right now, when we don't need to have bipartisan deals, we can just pass whatever we want. Nice shirt? Oh, why, thank you. Yeah, normally I'm wearing a t-shirt, but now I'm coming home from work, and since I'm working at work now, that have my work shirt on. Usually do polos like this. So yeah, they could be passing a whole bunch of stuff, especially through reconciliation. They could get rid of the the thing that keeps people from doing stuff. The oh my god, the minority can stop everything. Not gerrymandering. The fuck me. What's it called? So much brain damage. Okay, whatever. They can get rid of a bunch of stuff, pass a bunch of stuff, but they're not going to do it because they don't want to get stuff done. This smug self-congratulation about bipartisanship speaks volumes about the trajectory that public policy formation in Washington has been taking for decades. For establishment Democrat, Washington insiders like Biden, calling something bipartisan seems to be the greatest compliment one can pay a proposal. It's not hard to see why. In prevailing culture that constantly tells us how divided our country is, it provides a facile way of presenting oneself as a great statesman who's able to bridge the bitter divides and put the interest of the nation above petty partisan squabbles. The master of this pose was, of course, Biden's former senior running mate, Barack Obama, who waxed lyrical about his willingness to compromise with Republicans. Was he very rich then? A very smart person told me money causes brain damage. But if only I was rich. Believe me, my knowledge doesn't come from my sociopathic brain damage because I'm rich. It comes from hard work. I did all by myself. Nobody taught me anything. Except for Jacques Fresco, Bernie Sanders, Peter Joseph, and a shitload of books and articles I've read previously. Yeah. The reality, however, is that bipartisanship is not only a tool for lazy posturing, but also stands as possibly the biggest impediment to enacting a radical agenda that breaks with the neoliberal status quo. After all, if the majority of people vote for one party and then that party compromises with the other that had only minority support, then you are thwarting the will of the majority and in turn, undermining democracy. Okay. Keep in mind that this happens in an atmosphere that is already steeply tilted against majority rule and towards minority obstructionism of even modestly left of center politics. At least you know now that the Netherlands is not a part of the Nordic countries. Okay, I read through that. I didn't read through it very deeply, but I've got to find. I was thinking about eco-humanistic countries, but that envelops many more countries. Well, not that there's a lot of those to begin with, but there's more countries than would fit in there. So I'm not sure what to use quite yet. I'm thinking about it. Filibuster, there it is. The Senate already gives disproportionate representation to small, white, and right-leaning states, and on top of that, has adopted an arcane set of rules surrounding the filibuster that requires a 60-40 supermajority for anything to pass. So yeah, we need to get rid of the filibuster. They could be doing that now, but they're not going to, because the point of the Democrats is to make sure that nothing really big gets done, right? Yeah, so that has to go. The Bird rule, the pay-go rule, there's a bunch of rules that have to go because they are against getting things done. Moreover, the influence of money in politics has meant that Congress members of both parties are so dependent on campaign contributions to get elected that they now serve corporate interests more than they do the interest of their voters. In fact, Democratic Party presidential candidates have out-fundraised their Republican rivals in some recent presidential contests. Barack Obama even received more from Wall Street than his Republican rivals in both 2008 and 2012, John McCain and Romney, respectively. In large part for this reason, public opinion is often weighed to the left of both major parties. Polling data consistently shows majority support for federal $15 minimum wage, ending the U.S.'s endless wars, and tougher regulation on Wall Street. The issue of healthcare is perhaps the most salient example of how this plays out. Overwhelming evidence shows that the vast majority of the U.S. public supports some form of public universal health system, including a majority of Republican voters, according to some polls. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? The majority of the U.S. public and the public at large, globally, is leftist. They want healthcare. They don't want violence. They want to live well, right? And they don't want corruption. I mean, that's just the way it is. And plenty of studies here in the United States at least show that the majority of Americans support the majority of, Bernie Sanders's policies. This is Democrat and Republican. But of course, Republicans and Democrats don't give a flying fuck about what the people mean, because that's, there's been studies done on that too. The Congress does not care what the people think. Only when Democrats control everything do the people just get a bone thrown at them just to make sure that they think that the Democrats are on their side. Biden is doing something you most likely like, and that is raise the inflation to absurd levels. No, that's not going to be a thing. That's not going to be a thing. You'd have to actually spend shitloads of money buying things we don't have access to do something like that. And he's not going to, any amount of money that the Democrats are going to spend, or Republicans, well, Democrats at least, isn't going to really do much of anything. Because they don't care. Yet, rather than pushing for a single-payer Medicare for all type system while he was president, Obama instead implemented a plan that was largely based on a proposal that congressional Republicans offered as their alternative to Hillary Clinton's plan in the 1990s. It's called Romneycare. 5%, pretty huge. Well, we'll see. Inflation's 3 to 5%, right? It's a thing. Doing so not only failed to implement a policy supported by a majority of the U.S. public, but also handed the Republicans a propaganda victory, with the Democrats now supporting their compromise. Republicans then presented this watered-down version of their base as some kind of communist conspiracy. With the Democrats having moved the goalpost for them, they were then able to go back to their former hardline position. That is supporting the status quo of private insurance company price gouging that leads to hundreds of thousands of personal bankruptcies per year, tens of thousands of preventable deaths annually, and leaves even more millions without access to care than the Obama's proposal does, at least compared to last decades. Oh, okay. I guess we'll see. I mean, most of it's going to be for police and war, you know, because that keeps going up nonstop. Murdering people is much more fun and profitable than doing good stuff. I suppose you gotta somehow pay for all those tax cuts for the rich and all that socialism for the rich. Ugh. In a cruel irony, given that no Republicans supported the bill, it ended up not even counting as bipartisan. On other occasions, Obama needlessly compromised with Republicans in order to maintain the bipartisan pose. Examples included the stimulus bill, which ultimately lacked the sufficient Keynesian investment to rescue the economy, enacting watered-down Dodd-Frank Act, which largely failed to implement wide-ranging financial reforms, and continuing Bush's bank bailout, which essentially rewarded Wall Street banks for their greed and recklessness that had led to the 2008 crash in the first place. Guess what? The inequality will become less. Everyone ends up poor. When does the inequality become less? How does everyone else become poor? Not in this country. Inequality only goes up. It's the only way it works. You can lessen it a little bit, because like they said, that one-time payment of what, $1,400 per person reduced poverty by 50%. I'm like, what? No, of course. Yeah. For inflation, you're referring to. Gotcha. Well, since it's proportional, right? 5% across the board, it doesn't really affect anything because it affects everyone equally. This is just enraging. So yeah, Obama oversaw one of the greatest transfers of wealth to the 1% with this compromise bullshit. If you have $1 million, then next year you have 50,000 less. Big deal? With as much as you have, it's irrelevant. It's a rounding error. Okay, not a rounding error, 5%, right? But with the 7% interest you're making on it, all you're really doing is reducing your actual return on investment. But you had to take into account anyhow, right? 3 to 5% is the average inflation rate, so you know that's to be expected on a large inflation. That's why I say when you look at any investment, if your investment is not over 5%, you're almost wasting your time with the investment, because I mean, compensating for inflation, but that's pretty much it. You're not gaining anything. You're just not losing something. History is now repeating itself with Biden's infrastructure proposal as part of an effort to keep Bernie Sanders' supporters mobilized and within the Democratic Party fold. Biden promised a $2.2 trillion American jobs plan that would invest heavily in both public works programs and human infrastructure. But the bipartisan deal announced on June 24th has been cut down to $1.2 trillion, roughly half of which will go exclusively to physical infrastructure. Crucially, the plan leaves out all the major environment provisions that were originally promised, such as investment in green jobs and a plan to combat global warming. Given that the climate crisis threatens not just the environment, but the continued viability of organized human life on the planet Earth, this can only be described as an abject failure. Yeah, and that's exactly right. If any infrastructure plan does not start at 10 million, you're basically wasting our time. So you added one here, and then we'll have a fucking conversation. Anything less than that doesn't deal with climate change, doesn't deal with minimum wage, doesn't deal with universal health care, doesn't deal with any of the shit that we actually need to be dealing with. To deal with crime, to deal with guns, to deal with suicides, to deal with poverty and inequality and climate change. It's just fucking stupid. As long as the Congress and their corporate owners make their bills, and doesn't matter how many of us die for fun and profit. Speaking to reporters in Washington alongside some of the senators who had pledged support for the deal, Biden said, "I clearly didn't get all he wanted. Didn't want anything, you fuckstick. They gave more than I think maybe they were inclined to give in the first place. No, they took what you had and they cut it in half. So Fuck off. Spoken like a true pragmatist and realist, to be sure. But one must ask why he is being so conciliatory, given that the Democrats control the White House and both chambers of Congress. The only plausible answer is that Biden is cynically presenting himself as hamstrung by political reality in order to appease his corporate donors while simultaneously placating the Sanders supporting base of his party. Yeah, that's what it is. It's creating an artificial method of saying, see, we can't do this stuff because this and this, when they most assuredly can. All the Democrats have to do is say, yeah, we're going to fucking do this because we have the votes, so go fuck yourself, and then do it. But they're not going to do it because that would mean they would actually get stuff done. And they can't do that. They have to make sure that the Democrats, that the Republicans are always seen as the enemy. Because if they don't say, if they can't say, see, Republicans bad, vote for us, then the lesser of two evils, the vote blue no matter who thing, kind of starts going away. Because then they actually start doing things, and then of course their corporate owners lose money, and then they themselves in Congress lose money because their corporate donors aren't going to pay them as much. They'll start paying the Republicans, and the corporations and the Democrats lose all their money and their power and their influence, and while the people actually win. Can't have that. Cannot have the people winning. Nuh-uh. I think the first two priorities should be equal education for everyone and equal medical care for everyone. You still have capitalism, and the rich are still richer, and the poor, at least the poor, have much better life. Yeah, and that's kind of how I have my policy set up. How the first we should do. I have education first. I mean, you can make an argument anyway here, but yeah, healthcare is a good argument for what you're making. And a part of that, sure. Education, healthcare, and then economic changes, because that's, minimum wage, vacation, sick time, that sort of stuff as well. Sure. Yeah, I could get on board with that. Yeah, I even say here in my policies, you can make an argument for, arranging this in many different ways. So I put education first and electoral reform and so on. But yeah. Yep. Keep in mind that in 2020, Biden became the first presidential candidate to receive over $1 billion in campaign contributions. The vast majority of this came from billionaires in the corporate sector, of course, because he's fucking bought and paid for. As early as June 2020, he had already received donations from over 90 billionaires and or their spouses, and from at least 20 powerful corporations, including the notorious vulture capitalist firm Bain Capital. Needless to say, these interests didn't give this money out of their goodness of their hearts. They expect something in return. And now that Biden has been elected, they will surely be counting on a return on their investment, which means no laws or policies that threaten their economic dominance or shift power away from corporate and billionaire elites toward the workers and the middle class. That's exactly right. Funny thing is that it makes the rich richer because educated, healthy employees make more money. Well, it can, right? I mean, if you had a highly equal society, you're very right. But the reason why our society is explicitly kept unequal is so ignorant people are much easier to control. And if they are struggling for housing and student debt and don't have a place to live and they don't have food, the more they're struggling, the less chance they have to see that class warfare is a thing and that the system is the problem and all these other things are the problem, and then they have no way of doing anything. They have zero economic power, zero political power, and that's much easier to control them that way. In order for your concept to matter, you have to have a country and businesses who have eco-humanistic values. We don't have that here at all. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Educated people are more motivated to do the right thing. And that's exactly right, which is why they don't want them educated. That's why there's been a 50-year attack on education, because educated people want to make changes, and the corporations and Congress do not want that because they cannot control us if we are educated. They cannot control us if we have time on our hands. They cannot control us if we are educated. Bipartisanship provides the perfect smokescreen for continuing this duplicitous quid pro quo. By presenting compromise with a far-right minority party as the only viable way of getting things done, Biden can thwart both majority rule and his own party's base by watering down all his pledges into center-right program of neoliberalism light. For radicals, there's only one conclusion that can be drawn from this sorry situation, that the Democratic Party is not a vehicle for, but rather an active impediment to radical reform. True statement. Why on earth would you want to control people well, no, the point is you don't want them to be happy. That is the whole point. If they're happy, then they are harder to control. Well, because you want to be able to control them. That's the whole point of inequality, right? Unhappy, struggling, powerless people are easier to control. Ignorant, so that you can maintain your money and your power and control over the government, so that people have no ability to make any changes. I mean, are you not paying attention to American politics at all? Because that's entirely what it is. Have you not listened to my stream before? But really, that's why education is so expensive. That's why healthcare is so expensive. That's why minimum wage is so low. That's why Obamacare was one of the largest giveaways to the corporate sector. That's why a bunch of what Trump did is a huge giveaway to the corporate sector. You could, but they are harder to control. And it's harder to inflict systemic and structural racist policies and class-based policies if everyone has access to education. Because right now, only the rich have access to amazing education. Because it's about class warfare, right? 1% versus the 99%. They cannot keep that up if everyone has access to equal education. That's why, for me, it's one of the leading things we need. Education. There is no democracy without a highly educated populace. Oh, I didn't want to put that there. Hold on. Then it is also 1 versus 99. Only 99% is then happy. Well, only the 1% is happy. 99% are struggling. And that's... What am I doing? There we go. There we go. Yeah, because only the 1% has the power and the influence and the money and the luxury, while the rest of us are trying to get student loans done. Yeah, it's exactly it. People struggling and suffering with no political power and no one that listens to them, and while the 99% do whatever the fuck they want. And I talk about something similar in this post. Oh, let's see. Where do I talk about this? Talk about the Overton window. There we go. So, yeah, in my post here, lesser of two evils, voting is antithetical to democracy. Okay, here I'm talking about the disease of centrism. But let's look at the ways that they can politically negate or ameliorate any potential leftist advancements. So, also because of the incremental nature of the incremental change, which centrists will programmatically tolerate, any incremental change can be effectively thwarted politically through these 5 methods. Placating the masses through rhetorical platitudes and theatrics to delay it, hoping that the movement will lose steam or move on so that no change will be required, right? Looking at the Kente cloth and the BLM and all those sorts of things that they say while doing jack shit to actually help solve these problems. They can prompt a party member who is under no electoral pressure to vote against and take a stand against the measure in toto when there is a danger of it passing because it is not the right time or some other bullshit excuse. Some recent examples of that might be the Parliamentarian or Kristen Cinema. These in-party actors are referred to as the, quote, rotating villain. They can negotiate and amending it into almost nothing while in Congress. Again, that's the role of bipartisanship, taking whatever thing that would whatever bill would actually bring, that could, if done properly, bring radical change. But with bipartisanship, you can negotiate that down into nothing. Then the barely existent incremental change can be incrementally implemented into ineffectuality by being delayed and or spread out through many years. Need to write that down here. Bipartisanship. Also, later on, following it being passed into law, the threadbare version of desired change can be amended into effectiveness or be completely removed through policy. And that's exactly what this is right here, right? They're passing something, but it's not something even close to what they can. They're using the bipartisanship to water it down because they was that 2.2 trillion, and now it's at 1.2 trillion, right? They use that bipartisanship as the excuse to hobble anything. The reason I don't understand it is that life is, in my opinion, not a competition. If your neighbor is happy, then that does not mean that you are unhappy. You can both be happy. I would actually be more happy if everyone is happy. So from a selfish point of view, I would like to live in a world where everyone is happy. Yeah, as would I. And life is a competition because of monetary systems. And what you're looking at there, what you're talking about there is called egotistic altruism, which I use. Do I use that here? Yeah, everyone else does well if everyone is doing well. Egotistic. Yeah, and that's the way it should be, but that's not how people make crap loads of money, unfortunately. That's not how the rich get rich. Again, that's that tension within methods of exchange, right? Do you do what's better for humanity, or do you do what's better for you? Do you make your millions, or do you let people die and let the pollution go? Again, as we've seen here with companies, because we have climate change, because countries aren't doing their part, again, tension keeps winning. And humanity keeps losing. And we're all gonna die. All right. Not to be completely, I don't want that here. I want this here. Want this here. And of course, again, you have to have a certain set of values in order for that to be a thing. Again, you're in your position of privilege in one of those eco-humanistic countries. Therefore, that's how things are much better done. But here, with the high levels of inequality, we don't have the luxury of doing that because of poverty. Don't have education, poverty, healthcare, and all that sort of bullshit. All right, so next. Corporate Democrats are attacking Nina Turner over Medicare for All. Of course they are, because fucking corporate Dems are Republicans. They're conservatives. Democrats bankrolled by Big Pharma are suddenly targeting Nina Turner right after she aired an ad touting Medicare for All. She's running against someone else for a primary in Ohio, I think. She was a Bernie Sanders delegate, 2016-2020, and she was also part of Congress at one point. Nina Turner speaks before Bernie Sanders takes the stage for a town hall discussion about healthcare on July 5th, 2019. Okay, so this is, prior to 2020. And she's also kind of one of the headliners for the People's Party, which may end up being the party she runs under, but I don't know if she will. All right. In mid-June, Democratic congressional candidate Nina Turner launched a television ad campaign promoting her support for Medicare for All. Less than 2 weeks later, the pharmaceutical industry's lobbyists and its bankrolled lawmakers on Capitol Hill are trying to block her election to Congress through an opponent who has been publicly vilifying Medicare for All amid a pandemic. That should immediately disqualify that fuckhead from even running. But yay, this is America. A 2018 poll showed that Medicare for All is wildly popular in Northeast Ohio, and Turner is running it in a district that has been presented for nearly 30 years by lawmakers who have supported legislation to create a government-sponsored single-payer healthcare system. Okay, that includes Marcia Fudge, who left Congress to serve in President Joe Biden's cabinet. Pledging to carry on that legacy, Nina Turner launched her television spot entitled Worry on June 15th, in which she talks about how her family struggles to pay health care bills led her to support Medicare for All. The very next day, corporate lobbyists held a Washington fundraiser for Turner's primary opponent, Shontel Brown. Among those headlining the fundraiser was Jerome Murray, a registered lobbyist for the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, who's been backing a nationwide campaign to reduce support for Medicare for All. Yeah, and as a part of my policies, and I added this fairly recently, we need to nationalize the development of vaccines. Nationalize them and then open source them. The fundraiser followed Brown slamming Medicare for All amid a pandemic that has seen more than 1 million Ohioans lose their employment-sponsored health care. Brown told Cleveland.com that while she would not oppose the legislation if it ever came to a vote on the House floor, Medicare for All would eliminate employers from providing care for other employees. Yeah, no fucking shit. And this whole fucking argument drives me nuts. Well, but you would lose your employee bargain for healthcare. Oh my fucking god. No shit, Sherlock. And you would gain everything at half the cost. It's that fear. It's that fear mongering. I know when I'm out in the community, there's some people who are satisfied with their health care they're being provided because they're in a fucking position of fucking privilege. Gaming Man, how you doing, man? Welcome. I'm bitching about capitalism and Democrats. Fuck that privilege. That's right. That's fucking right. Yeah, so there are some people who are satisfied with the healthcare they're being provided. That's just fucking privilege at its finest, right? I mean, I've got good healthcare. I've got an HMO. Although even with that, you know, that didn't cover the massages I needed to help deal with my knees or my frozen shoulder. Can't get laser surgery. Got separate dental. Yeah, you're lucky you live in Germany. Yeah, exactly. And I wish I lived in a more socialized state because life would be so much less stressful. So this article is covering Nina Turner's running for Ohio. Whoa! Wall of text. That's what we differ from, and I think that is because our different backgrounds. Everybody can be rich. Nope, no, not everyone can be rich. Some might still be richer than others, of course, but at least everybody has a luxurious life. Not in this country. Not in most of the world. I don't care if someone else has a golden iPhone case and I have a leather case. The iPhone stuff is still the same. So in general, we live in a sort of equal life. Same for cars. My boss might drive a Porsche and I drive a Golf, but it's still both good cars. Some is most definitely better than other. Again, you're in your position of privilege that it's hard for you to get through. Yeah, hearing for the first time U.S. citizens need to pay for the operations is mind-boggling. Oh, I bet. There's a few videos on that. Just talking about how much it costs, you know, to do anything here. I've got a post on kind of the case for healthcare that I'd been working on. I haven't had time to work on it, but yeah, there's like a few videos on that. Yeah, exactly right. System of oppression. Yep, systemic and structural oppression, and people are kept poor. It's by design. That's exactly right. And that's and Alex and I were kind of talking about that earlier. That the system is meant to keep people poor and struggling and ill-educated and not having time and suffering, because such a group of people are much easier to control because they don't have the education or the time to educate themselves on the politics or who and the why and so on. Yeah, it's pretty messed up. Pretty fucking messed up. And Brown's the person who's running against Nina Turner. Let me go back up here. I'm pretty sure you've seen her, right? Nina Turner. She's a Bernie Sanders delegate. She was there for the People's Party and their little thing. I'm excited by her, but I'm curious if she's going to run with the People's Party or under Democrats or something like that. We'll see how this turns out. So Brown then rolled out an endorsement from Hillary Satan Clinton, who infamously used her 2016 presidential campaign to declare that Medicare for All would never ever happen. Because fuck you. Now U.S. Representatives James Clyburn, fuck this guy too, one of the Democratic Party's most outspoken opponents of Medicare, and he's black, is intervening to try to halt Turner's rise to the polls. Now here we're getting to this fucking intersectional imperialism, intersectional oppression. Even black people are part of the oppression of other black people, right? Right here. James Clyburn is also the person that spoke out and basically handed, was it South Carolina to whichever state to Biden. Had he stepped up and said, hey, vote for Bernie, he probably would have won that and would have taken it. Oh, have to go sleep? All right, man. Have a good night. Get some fucking AC. Seriously. It really disturbs me. Have a good night. We'll see you later, man. Yeah, so fuck Clyburn. Let's make sure this is the right guy I'm bitching about. Yeah, it's the right guy. Fuck that guy. And he's against Medicare for All, and he's trying to keep Tina Turner from rising in the polls. Clyburn has vacuumed in more than $1 billion from donors in the pharmaceutical industry, of course, corporate whore, and he previously made headlines vilifying Medicare for All during the 2020 presidential primary, because fuck that guy. I mean, yeah, fuck those people for real. That's exactly right. This is even worse because he's a person of color, and how much this would help women of color and families of color, it would be just insane how much it would help them. Any single policy that would help anyone would help people of color more than anyone else, because people of color are disproportionately cast down into poverty. And it takes like 20 fucking years of nothing going wrong to get out of poverty. That intergenerational poverty, read that article a few weeks ago. If your family was impoverished, you're most likely going to be impoverished too. And this is a way to help people get out of that. He's like, you know what? Fuck them. I've got my millions. So fuck that guy. Arrgh. When a Medicare for All bill was first introduced in 2017, Clyburn signed on as a co-sponsor, but 2 years later, Clyburn removed himself as a sponsor and turned against single-payer health insurance because he got paid, arguing that would hurt the party in congressional elections. Only if you're a fucking corporate stooge. They participate in the system for survival reasons. Well, fuck capitalism. Yeah, fuck capitalism. Days before the South Carolina primary, Clyburn endorsed Biden. Yep, here we go, South Carolina. Arguing that Democrats who supported Medicare for All had not helped the party win back its House majority in 2018. What? The people who ran on Medicare for All are the ones that won. Just like in 2020. That's why the squad over doubled. Because they ran Medicare for All. Fuck that guy. After Democrats lost a dozen House seats in the 2020 election, Clyburn blamed progressive policies, including Medicare for All. If we are going to run a Medicare for All, defund the police, socialize medicine, we're not going to win. Fucking wrong. Okay, fuck this guy. I'm getting pissed now. Arrgh. Fuck that guy. Just that the intersectional oppression is just, God, it fucking pisses me off. His ass needs to be primaried, like, into being a janitor or something. What am I doing here? Arrgh. What the fuck is a D&I strategy? Oh, Oracle, take the unknown out of your D&I strategy. I have no fucking clue. Okay. Diversity and inclusion. There we go. That's what it means. Go beyond tracking demographics to spark change and drive impact. There we go. Diversity and inclusion. Okay, so you want to do that. You support universal healthcare, universal education, universal housing, and minimum wage increase. There you go. All right. So more. No. Right? Oh my God. Only solutions, one profit. Exactly. Yeah, this is just God. This is just fucking cranky today. Profit only moral bar there is. Yeah, well, that's what I say, right? My tension post. Profit no matter the cost. That is the only value system we have as a species. And that's the fun of, that's where it all goes wrong. Every single transaction, it's about tribal profit or doing what's good for humanity. And profit wins. Son of a fucking bitch in a box. Okay, I'm just really cranky today. Arrgh. The twisted psychology of capitalism and why it won't hold sway forever. Well, climate change is why. We're gonna fucking die, bitch! Everyone is just lazy. Why don't you just see that? Right? Well, I mean, that's kind of what Anna Hawks was, he didn't specifically use the word lazy, he used the word chaos as an argument. And the other guy that I wrote that post for, I don't know if he used lazy either. But that's exactly right? Without the profit motive, why the fuck else would anyone ever want to work? Right? And that's when I was getting into resource-based economies, I ran into that quite often, and I wrote a whole post on why that wouldn't be a thing. And this is important because this is one of those things that we always run into when you're looking at like universal healthcare of UBI, right? And those sorts of things that it's the motivation. Why will they work then? Well, what it boils down to is people who are highly educated, how you take your education and do something with it is work. Right? It might be research, might be going out in the field and doing stuff, but a highly educated populace wants to do stuff. And highly educated populace understands many things. They see problems, but they also, when they see problems, they also have an idea how to do a solution, working towards a solution. Now, albeit a highly educated populace won't want to do menial labor, right? Because they've got a fucking education. Why the fuck would you want to work in a factory or a McDonald's when your education covers something, more rewarding, at least for, if that's your thing. Unless you're into trade labor, then that's a whole other thing. Can't you see innovation will die? It's totally developed by companies and not by public universities. Right? I mean, oh my fucking God. Yeah, I mean, exactly right. Because a lot of the, the internet is built on government dollars, university dollars, touchpad. A lot of the stuff that we take for granted for today is all done by the government and by the corporation, not by the corporations, by the government and the universities and stuff like that. And then eventually when that gets developed enough, it gets released to the public sector, and then they do something specific with it. People working in public universities here have no profit motive. You are paid shit. Oh, really? That's too bad. They do it for the sake of research. Well, yeah, research is important. Again, when you're looking at the minimum wage thing, giving people that, keeping wages as equal as possible means that people will be doing what they want to do because it's what they want to do, not because of the money. Like doing research because you want to do research, yeah, that's awesome. And that's the way it should be. And I imagine there'd be if everyone is highly educated, there'd be a shitload of people doing research. Maybe the wrong word. But they're decently paid, but companies pay big. Oh, of course. Right. Private sector always pays more. That's always going to, that's going to be a thing because it shouldn't be though. Government could pay the same if they chose to, but they don't. Unless of course if the universities are powered by state taxes, yeah, then they are limited. So taxation becomes an issue. But if those roles are paid by the federal government, then they can meet the public, they can meet the private sector in terms of pay and that sort of a thing as well. But yeah, that's always going to be a thing, because money. It doesn't need to be that way. Yeah, highly educated people. It's not just, highly educated people along with access to open source data. If you can do that, you give people access to a whole lot of data and a whole lot of education, and then people start crunching those numbers and help solving our problems, because that's such a powerful thing. Open source data access, research access, our world in data, exactly. And then highly educated people, being able to take advantage of the entire global brain trust to solve problems. I mean, how much are we fucking missing over proprietary data, proprietary IP laws and all that sort of stuff? There's so many things we could be solving, but we don't, because some fucking corporation somewhere is going to lose out a few billions. Oh, they do. And I've got I have a collection of links somewhere in Facebook talking about, just that sort of a thing, right? The teens solved this problem or created this invention, or, they fucking graduated high school or college at 18 and their doctorates by 20. I mean, when you have kids or any individual in the right environment, it's amazing what they can do. And that's, when I run for school board, that's kind of what I want to talk about, or I have talked about. They have a gifted learners kind of program. Well, every single child is a gifted learner. We just have to find the right conditions that unlock their quote gifts and their desire and their joy and their their passion for learning. And that's where we've failed. I mean, partially it's because of the way our education system is here in this country, right? It's still in the industrial age. We're, basically, we start with the Nordic, what those countries are doing, and then move forward. The best possible thing we could do that any politician can say, well, we're going to out-Nord the Nordic countries. That's what we're going to do. We're going to start with finding out whatever they're at. We're going to start there, move our policies there, and then try and do it better than them. We're going to try and embarrass them in their own policies. Highly talented kids, but also people just interested in some random topic. Yep, IT security, for example. If someone's interested in this topic already in middle school, they just do it because it's fun. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's why open source education is so important as well. And that's why online courses and things like that are so important. Because you never know what some child is going to be interested in. And finding that, and then, once you find out what that is and give them access to it and let them just fucking go nuts on it, that's how you supercharge their education, supercharge their desire to learn. Because you find out what they're interested in, you give them what they want, then you help to forge that educational plan, for IT security, and then put in history, put in math, put in other things that help them to learn the other things they need to learn while still learning about the thing that they're passionate about. That's why I hate our university. They fucking keep courses from us. It's basically a black box until we take the course. Yeah. Now, obviously, there is some reason for that, for prerequisites or something like that. But, if you could test out of those prerequisites or show something, or if you can just audit the course, that would be another way to get around that too. If you can audit the course, just go there, just listen to it, even though you don't get credit for it. But in the same token, if you go to the class and you fail the class, and that's something that just you have to deal with. So yeah, our school has prerequisites as well. I don't know. I haven't really gone through that so much because I went to a private college. So I didn't have to deal with that quite so much because they had specifically, it's more about colliding times and Corona. Bougie. Well, yeah. Well, it's not that I wanted to unfollow. Fuck. Everyone's leaving me. It's not that I wanted to. I was specifically looking for a on Twitch and Twitter and Discord and all the places. I wanted specifically computer information systems, and I couldn't find a state college that had that. Or one that if I did go to, I'd have to go quite far away from where I'm at. And it was a newer college, and yeah, it was okay. I wasn't blown away by their education because they had like when I was learning C, or no, it wasn't C. It was a Visual Basic for Access. They had someone who was going to classes just to learn how to teach it. He's a nice guy, but it's hard for me to ask questions when he didn't know. Every computer science uni. Oh yeah. Oh no, I feel ya. And that's the problem. And then if more of these courses were online and if they were open and connected like they need to be, I mean, there's so much wasted time in universities creating courses when you could have the whole industry. MOOCs, yeah, exactly. You could have entire industries creating the classes, massively online open courses. I think you got it right. I don't know. I know what you mean. We're close enough for government work. That an entire industry could put together classes on a given topic, and then the whole world could use it. All you'd have to do from that point is translate it from language to language. So much potential wasted in capitalism with education, especially with all these fucking research sitting behind a fucking paywall. That is just the worst. Especially some of these university research that is paid for by the public. All that shit should be open. Again, it's a bitch before. They're like too popular sites for them. Yeah, I've heard that. When I was first getting into politics, right, there was I bitched about, I was doing my research on evolutionary psychology and biology and some theology, and my research would be stopped cold because there's this fucking research paper sitting behind a goddamn paywall. Are you fucking kidding me? How much? Open source all the things. I'm just getting pissed. All right, so the twisted psychology of capitalism and why it won't hold sway forever because of climate change. That's why we're all going to burn and we're all going to die. That's why. Post-war capitalism trades not on happiness, but on unhappiness. Yeah, so this is going to kind of get into advertising and stuff like that. 6-minute read. Okay. From Fast Company. When is this from? I think I've shared this already with you guys. Yeah, from 6:30. So this is just from yesterday. All right, here we go. If you listen to economists talk about the world right now, you'd be forgiven for feeling a little confused. The pandemic precipitated the worst recession since the stock market crash of 1929. Although the stock market wouldn't know that, I suppose. Nor would the rich. Now we're told the U.S. and China could be heading for the fastest recovery on record, but it's set to be uneven, a tale of two recoveries, according to the World Bank. The best of times for the rich, the worst of times for the poor, same as it ever was. Yeah, and that's exactly right. And this is what it boils down to. Sure, the rich are doing fucking awesome, but the rest of us, yeah, no, we're not doing well at all. What does this all mean as we emerge from lockdown and look toward the even bigger challenges that lie ahead? Climate change, the devastating loss of nature, and the social inequality that still haunts society. Obviously, it's all just going to get worse. We've covered a lot of that stuff here, especially with climate change. We're going to have climate refugees. There's hottest temperatures in Arctic, and it's going to keep getting that way. Just everything it's going to be on fire in the summer. Accelerating climate change, all the good stuff where we're all gonna fucking die. The pursuit of GDP growth has been the holy grail of capitalism since the Second World War, but its relevance to the quality of our lives has always been a little sketchy. Shortly before the UK took its fateful Brexit vote in 2016, a government advisor came to a town meeting to persuade the people to vote Remain because of the impact leaving the European Union could have on the country's GDP. That's your bloody GDP, shouted a woman in the audience. It's your GDP. It's not ours. Exactly. And again, the GDP and the stock market have nothing to do with Sci-Hub. Yeah. I've posted this here before a long time ago. Thanks for posting that again, because I need to have access to this. I haven't done much research recently. I got fucking posts I need to finish, but I just haven't had the time to finish. You have no idea what it's called? Yeah. That's the one. I remember that one. I don't remember what the other one is, though. Yeah. I haven't either. It's just fucking. It's just enraging. Like, so let me go put on this book, Donut Economics. So Donut Economics, although thanks to our uni, we have access to quite a research papers. Yeah, if you're already part of the university system, you have access to a lot of that already, and that's a good thing. But once you're out, you can just fuck off. So this book here, Donut Economics, I really recommend reading this, because it really talks about this kind of a thing that, we need to be. Actually, let me also throw this out here too. The economies for the common good. These are very similar things that we need to be judging how our society is doing, not based off the GDP or how well the stock market is doing, but by things that actually matter. And that's the truth. That is so true, because we keep looking at the money. That doesn't tell us how well poverty is doing or how well the environment's doing. And that's the struggle. We need better benchmarks to judge how well our country and our people are doing. We don't judge it by how the rich are doing, is because fuck those classist asses. But we should be looking at poverty, inequality, and pollution. 5 minutes? You're gonna miss everything in 5 minutes. Thank you. All right, take your time. GDP is bullshit measure. True dat, homie. True dat. That's what the whole thing is about, so we're good. For the last half century, our obsession with growth has never consistently benefited everyone. No shit. Quite often, it was the rich who benefited most. And as the economy grew and grew, the impact on the planet has been nothing short of devastating. It's tempting to wonder, as the recovery takes shape, whether this time we might aim for something better. Oh my. But to get there, we may first have to learn some harsh lessons from history. Well, there's some people in office who want to do that, right? Squad, potentially, depending on how you want to moderate your rage on them. I do have some of that. But again, because the Democrats and Republicans are both conservatives, neither one of them actually want to do things that actually matter. We bitched about that earlier in the stream, so I'm not going to keep going into that. But it's a thing, right? The manufacturer of desire. The crash of 1929, which precipitated the Great Depression, has been called with some accuracy a crisis of overproduction. Technological innovation had generated massive increases in productivity. Our ability to produce had outstripped our desire for the product. Supply was plentiful, but demand was insufficient. Prices fell, confidence plummeted, investments slowed, unemployment soared, and it took a decade and a half in the military expenditure of World War II to get the global economy back on track. So yeah, World War II was a huge part of that, and of course, what pulled us out of that slump from the Great Depression was, of course, all the infrastructure, manufacturing that was created during that time through the government, but also the marginal tax rates being jacked up to like 92%. The destruction of inequality and shitloads of government expenditure on infrastructure. That's what got us there. And that's what we could be doing today, too. Again, like I said, we're looking at fucking Biden's anemic plan going from 2.2 trillion down to 1.2 trillion. If you're not starting at fucking $10 trillion, you're not doing anything that matters to this country in the long term. It's just a fucking giveaway to the 1%. We might, at that point, have reflected more deeply on what it is that humans really need and how best to deliver it. We might have looked more critically at our obsession with productivity for the sake of productivity. But instead, capitalism responded to that crisis by stimulating desire. Never again should we suffer from insufficient demand. Along came a whole new industry. designed to manufacture not products, but desire, to stimulate the demand that capitalism needed to maintain the engine of growth. Again, we're talking about marketing, right? To further this cause, the madmen of the post-war years drew on a vision of humanity that casts us all as restless, insatiable consumers. Their latter-day mimics pursue our every move with algorithm-driven marketing, promising unrivaled happiness so long as we continue to shop. Was it our imagination, or did lockdown bring a step change in our online exposure to instant gratification? We know it isn't real, but the lure is irresistible. Like kids in the candy shop, we are continually persuaded to spend money we don't have on things we don't need, to create impressions that won't last on people we don't love or even give a flying fuck about. In the meantime, the poor still suffer, and the planet reels from our indulgences. Again, you look at my policies, my economic and sustainability policies specifically, and it really kind of gets into this thing, shifting to a sharing, having resource sharing centers, getting rid of planned obsolescence, shifting to modular and universal designs on things, and things like that will help combat some of this problem. There's a paradox here familiar to us all. Post-purchase dissonance, or buyer's remorse, is an expression that psychologists use to describe the disappointment we sometimes feel upon realizing that our latest purchase doesn't fulfill its promise, or it's not as exciting or as amazing as we thought it would be, or life-changing. On deeper reflection, it turns out to be the structural basis for the success of consumerism. Post-war capitalism trades not on happiness, but on unhappiness. The engine of consumer society is discontent. Yeah, if you are content, then you don't need to buy anything else. This is more than just a rhetorical claim. Let's take consumerism's more ostentatious charms. The glitter and bling, the endless parade of new and exciting products that keep us shopping. Novelty lies at the beating heart of capitalism. Innovation is vital to enterprise. Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter called it creative destruction. The continual throwing over of old in favor of the new. The relentless search of the entrepreneur for new markets and new products to fill them with. These are the rewards that innovations can bring. And of course, a part of this whole process is, that everything's proprietary. They aren't easy to upgrade. They aren't easy to fix or anything like that. And so there's so much wasted resources in that, so much pollution and so on. But for this to work, novelty must accompany a pivotal place in the human heart. The marketers have to persuade us just how much we love new stuff. Admittedly, they're pushing on an open door. There is, of course, a genuine desire for novelty in the human psyche. Conspicuous consumption signifies status and power, but novelty also signals hope. It holds out the promise of a brighter and shinier world for us and for our children. Consumerism thrives on this promise. The job of advertisers is to ensure that we never forget it. Consumerism's most glittering prize is the promise of immortality itself, an earthly paradise of never wanting, never needing, never lacking for anything imagination can dream of. The human animal is a beast that dies, and if he's got money, he buys and buys and buys, says Big Daddy in Tennessee Williams' play Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And I think the reason he buys everything he can is that the back of his mind is the crazy hope that one of his purchases will be life everlasting. Suddenly, we find ourselves in the grip of a powerful social logic. Economic structure on the one hand and human psyche on the other binds us into an iron cage of consumerism. Trading on shame. The first crack in the shiny surface appears with the realization that the system itself is rooted in anxiety. The economist Adam Smith called this the desire to live a life without shame. Shame magnifies consumer needs. Advertisers know this only too well. They play on the power of misplaced shame. What does your car, house, holiday, laptop, toilet roll say about you? They ask in ever more beguiling ways. In Smith's day, a relatively modest set of goods could stave off social shame. He talked about the need for a simple linen shirt, the want of which would be supposed to denote that disgraceful degree of poverty, which it is presumed nobody can well fall into without extreme bad conduct. Nowadays, the must-have basket of necessary goods has expanded massively, as indeed it has to do for the system to continue to work. Again, that infinite growth, the infinite consumption problem with capitalism. Fast cars, fast food, fast sex, fast fashion. If we ever stop coveting the fruits of desire, the economy starts to fail. Unemployment rises, instability beckons. Yeah, and I write about... Okay, all right, I'll keep going. And this is precisely why anxiety must tip over into outright dissatisfaction if capitalism is to survive. All right, I read about this earlier, and I'm going to read this again. If you go... Implode, where did I talk about that? All right, here we go. So here, go back over here. So if we ever stop coveting the fruits of desire, the economy starts to fail. Employment rises, instability beckons. Now, if you look at my policies and what eco-humanism and various progressive policies will end up doing, especially if implemented on a large scale, especially over time, and it's consistent, and you work towards ending planned obsolescence and things of that nature, that people are going to buy less, and also the population is going to decline. If you increase the required, go back over here. Again, you maximize product lifetimes so that there isn't garbage there to buy. There aren't 4 different qualities of any given thing. So one thing that breaks in a year or 2 years or 5 years instead of something that lasts for 30 or 40 years. Making sure things are fully recyclable, modular, open sourced, and you have resource sharing centers, right? All these sorts of things will greatly reduce the ability or desire for people to actually buy things. And it'll help to get rid of some of these issues too, because then everyone will have access to the things that they want, especially the things that will, ooh, it's cool, right? And then if people find out it's not really interesting, and then they stop using them, and then no one buys it because they have access to them, these crappy things inside the resource sharing centers. Then you combine that sort of progress with a declining population, which happens naturally through demographic transitions as societies progress. Right there, you're going to see capitalism implode. And this is precisely why anxiety must tip over into outright dissatisfaction if capitalism is to survive. Consumerism must promise paradise, but it must systematically fail to deliver it. It must fail us, not occasionally, as psychologists suggest, but repeatedly. Endlessly invoking desire, relentlessly delivering disillusion. The success of consumer society lies not in meeting our needs, but in its spectacular ability to continually disappoint us. Recovery for realists. This might seem at first like a dark and hopeless conclusion. I don't believe it is. It's an essential recognition that consumerism is, and always was, a social construct, a necessary element in a story that is no more real than the Tooth Fairy, a fanciful but unfulfilling dream sold to us by the architects of desire in order to perpetuate the engine of growth, a historical cul-de-sac that has led us perilously close to disaster, but those lessons may still save us. And back. Okay. Okay, looks like we have a book here. Post-Growth, Life After Capitalism. Okay, what the hell is he talking about? A bit more than 5 minutes. That's going to cost you 5 demerits. You're too late. I don't know what this book is. I've not heard of it. All right, well, let's keep seeing what he has to say. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, wrote Maya Angelou, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. As we stumble warily out of lockdown, searching for recovery and struggling to make sense of the economist's confusing prognostications, we would do well to heed the lessons learned, not just through this pandemic, but from previous crises and from earlier recoveries. We're nowhere near done with the pandemic. Hitching our wagons once again to the myth of eternal growth is a surefire recipe for disaster. Consumerism degrades the environment. It divides us from each other. Okay, good. Ultimately, it undermines the happiness it promises to deliver. But to recognize this failing is to loosen the chains that bind us to a dysfunctional prison of our own making. From here, we can begin to understand both why consumerism must eventually fall and how to replace it. Fuckerhead, why aren't you going to tell me how to replace it? Son of a bitch! Don't fucking leave me with that cliffhanger. Fuck. Now I may have to read his book. Post-growth. Teasing bastard. How dare you? How dare you? Oh, Giannis Varoufakis. Okay, who? Tim Jackson wrote this. All right, well, it's there. This is the book if you're interested in. I'm kind of interested in what they have to say about post-capitalism too, but I can't imagine it's actually going to be about something that, resource-based economy. Can't imagine that at all. All right, so there's that. All right, this one is about a week old, so let's take a look at this. All right. This is from June 22nd. It's from last week. Had this sitting here. Legal experts worldwide draw up historic definition of ecocide. Okay, draft law is intended to prosecute offenses against the environment. My policies. I have the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth, and I definitely have that we need to start prosecuting people for crimes against not only humanity, but for crimes against nature. So this is definitely a good step towards slapping bitches up who are destroying the environment. Okay, legal experts from across the globe have drawn up a historic definition of ecocide, intended to be adopted by the International Criminal Court to prosecute the most egregious offenses against the environment. Get some. The draft law unveiled on Tuesday defines ecocide as unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is substantial likelihood of severe and widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. Okay. The Stop Ecocide Foundation initiative comes amid concerns that not enough is being done to tackle the climate and ecological crisis. Adopted by the ICC's members, it would become just the fifth offense the court prosecutes, alongside war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and the crime of aggression. Okay, I don't know what that is. And the first new international crime since the 1940s, when Nazi leaders were prosecuted at the Nuremberg trials. Professor Philip Sands, QC, of University College London, who co-chaired the panel that spent the past 6 months hammering out the definition. Yikes, the four other crimes all focus exclusively on the well-being of human beings. This one, of course, does that, but it introduces a new non-anthropocentric approach, namely putting the environment at the heart of international law, and so that is original and innovative. So let's look at my policies. Let's look at my 8 philosophical pillars for peace. Yeah, that's exactly what we need to be doing. And they need to be much more aggressive about this. There's so many crimes against humanity, so many crimes against the natural world going on. Every single coal mine is a crime. Every single pipeline is a crime. And it all needs to be stopped. For me, the single most important thing about this initiative is that it's part of that broader process of changing public consciousness, recognizing that we are in a relationship with our environment. We are dependent for our well-being on the well-being of the environment, and that we have to use various instruments, political, diplomatic, but also legal, to achieve the protection of the environment. An ecocide law that has been mooted for decades with the Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme pushing the concept at the 1972 UN Environmental Conference in Stockholm. More recently, ecocide was considered for inclusion in the 1998 Rome Statute establishing the ICC before being dropped. Scottish barrister Polly Higgins led a decade-long campaign for it to be recognized as a crime against humanity before her death in 2019. Okay, like a bit less than 10 minutes. Oh, okay, is it taking its time? Shouldn't be. Worm, how you doing? Did how you doing? Have you guys been chatting for a while and I'm just catching it? Oh, okay. Well, that's strange. Might be the going to and from io.restream.io that's causing the problem. Sorry, guys. How you doing? Welcome back. Talking about ecocide as a member, as one of the things for the International Criminal Court. Did I miss anything? ZG, oh my god. It's the third time this week. Keep telling him to leave me alone, but he won't. All right. Well, I'll go and share this again for you so you know what we're reading. Be more communist. They don't happen again. That's true. That's probably exactly right. I'll work on that. Well, like a lot of leftist streamers here are, quote, communist or tankies or whatever, right? And I'm just like, I resist that label because I don't know enough about communism. But obviously, I'm the resource-based economy, which for me, I believe it's a step farther left of communism and socialism. But that's just my uneducated opinion. No, it seems to be anarchist. Oh, okay. Denial of service. Distributed denial of service. Oh, God. It's the third time this week. Hate Marxist Leninist. I've kind of heard that too. I don't know why. I don't know. I have zero nuance as far as that's concerned. It's a whole thing. It's a whole different area to dive into. For being too based, I guess. It could be. Too based, you broke the clock. All right. For me, the single most important thing about this initiative is that it's part of the broader process of changing public consciousness, recognizing that we are in a relationship with our environment. We are dependent on our well-being and the well-being of the environment, and that we have to use various instruments, political, diplomatic, and also legal, to achieve protection of the environment. That's very good. I hate Lenin, Stalin, just met, two cowards. Okay, interesting. Killed a lot of people. I used to hate them too. Interesting. I have not delved that way quite yet. Someday, I've got to have enough balls to sit down and actually read the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital, but such a dense thing, so fucking dense. Ecocide law has, okay, we read that already. The members of the panel, which also include experts from Samoa, Ecuador, and U.S., are hopeful that now is the right time for agreement. The other co-chairs, Dior Falsao, a UN jurist and former prosecutor for Senegal, said the environment is threatened worldwide by the very serious and persistent damage caused to it, which endangers the lives of the people who live in it. This definition helps to emphasize that the security of our planet must be guaranteed on an international scale. Good stuff there. Really fucking good. In the current context, where serious damage to the environment is increasingly important and affects a large number of states, their support could be gained for this new definition of the crime of ecocide. One can think, among others, of island developing states that are subject to ecological ecocides committed by corporations. Yes, we need to sue, we need to try corporations for ecocide and start fucking killing these corporations, just killing them. I'll believe a corporation is a person the day we execute one. Several small island nations, including Vanuatu in the Pacific and the Maldives in the Indian Ocean, called for serious consideration of a crime of ecocide at the ICC's annual Assembly of States Parties in 2019. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, has championed the idea, as has the Pope, and other European countries have expressed an interest. Now, they're all for this until they actually start having to, crack down on their, their countries and their corporations. Honestly, I'm not sure that if the empire still existed, it wouldn't be the same. LOL. Could be. Well, they're most likely going to, almost all of them will end up authoritarian, much as we've seen in the USSR and China. Unfortunately. The ICC has been criticized for not investigating major environmental crimes. In 2016, it said it would assess existing offenses such as crimes against humanity in a broader context to include environmental destruction and land grabs. Sands and some panel members had pushed for the definition of to explicitly mention climate change, but that was rejected because of a desire to make it more difficult for countries and corporations to oppose the proposed new law. Okay. And Russia is always fucked? Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I talk about why communism and socialism failed, and a lot of it has to do with technology, but also values. Anytime you don't have the right values, no matter what you try to do, you're gonna be fucked, and that's just kind of the way it is, right? I mean, Russia tried, following the revolution to shift to socialism or whatever, but they failed. They had technological problems because they didn't have the industrial capacity. They didn't have access to computers for the centralized management of all of it. They didn't have the productive capacity to provide for their children. And of course, the corruption of money, which is at the very core of why every single attempt to communism and socialism has effectively failed. I think the only one that hasn't completely failed and ending up in completely that have not ended up completely autocratic was Cuba. But even Cuba has lots of those failures in there too. As long as money exists, very few attempts at making the world a better place are going to be successful. Okay. Instead, it created a definition that catches the most egregious acts, but doesn't catch all kinds of daily activities that so many of us, myself included, in regions and peoples and countries are involved in, which cause significant harm to the environment over the long term. He cited transboundary nuclear accidents, major oil spills, and Amazon deforestation as potential examples of ecocide, good, but on a smaller geographical scale. Also, the unlawful killing of a significant protected species, such as the two remaining northern white rhinos. Which tries to be different, and their ways is weird as fuck because the country still sucks. Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of that is because of the corruption, right? The corruption and how much land there is, a lot of rural territories there, and the conservatism by virtue of their being very conservative and religious, right? Russian Orthodox and Catholicism, and the high levels of poverty and the autocracy. If you get out from under the autocracy and you actually have a government that actually cares about people, then that stuff will change radically. It's all about having that government that cares and is trying to make the world a better place for people. Then everything changes. Because then it will be about lowering inequality. You do that, and things change. Jojo Mehta from Stop Ecocide Foundation said it was a historic moment, adding, the resulting definitions is well pitched between what needs to be done concretely to protect ecosystems and what will be acceptable to states. It's concise, it's based on strong legal precedents, and it will mesh well with existing laws. Governments will take it seriously, and it offers a workable legal tool corresponding to a real and pressing need in the world. Okay, so there you go. This is a good thing. Very good thing. Russia? That's a good one. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, all countries have a problem with that in one form or another because money exists and it's always a part of the problem. Even the Nordic states have issues with it. A big part of their problem is wealth inequality because they have some of the highest levels of, old world wealth going on in there. But they have low levels of income inequality, which is amazing, right? All right, guys. Reached my 2 hours. So it's going to be time for me to go. Last moment for comments before we call this a day. Oh, my chat's broken. Thanks for messaging me. Yeah, well, we all have that brain damage, right? From capitalism. We all have that brain damage, that sociopathy, because it's all about us trying to survive in a world that's trying to devour us. If it would let us die in the streets if it could, as long as some rich person can make money from it. And the struggle is for us to understand that we have that brain damage, that we have that sociopathy, and try and keep ourselves from succumbing to it. To help waken others up to the brain damage and to the system that causes it. Yeah, we're all broken. We just have to realize we are and try and work against it. All right. Use the chance to present even a small transfer to Wormiak and Yandex. And all Yandex results linked to your stream. That would be awesome. Yeah. All right, guys. Have a great night. Thank you guys for gifting me with some of your time. I appreciate it. I apologize for the chat not working properly. I don't know what the hell's up with that. But I can definitely get a blame Restream for that. So everyone have a great week, night, and great week. I'll be on again on Saturday. So you guys stay COVID free, and we'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Just me and you, let's make up all the rules. Count to 10 and watch the stars turn blue. Watch the